Well, hello there. My name is Louis, aka Louis the Frenchie Monette, and I'm sure you have a lot of opinions and love to talk about them. But told yourself, I don't know how to do a podcast. I don't even know where to start. Well, look, listen to me, okay? If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make your podcast. Let me explain. It's free. They even have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right here from your phone or computer. No hassle, no complications. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. No headaches, no complication. It is done for you. You can even make money from your podcast. No minimum listenership required. Everything you need to make your podcast is there in one place. Now, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. It's one click away and you will not regret it. So, thank you for listening and click that button. Bye bye. Well, hello there. My name is Louis, aka Louis the Frenchie Monette, and you're currently listening to the Frenchie Watches. On tonight's episode of Frenchie Watches, where we're watching Jaws. And I have my man with me, Mr. Dave. How are you doing today?
It's Matt, but I'm doing good, Louis. Yourself?
Apparently very confused and not enough coffee in my body, but I'm good. Thank you very much.
All right, so we ready to get into this movie?
Oh yeah. So yeah,
So this was the first time you've seen it?
Well, I actually now remember I seen bits and pieces, but never as a whole, and never really paid attention to it.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was very interesting seeing the whole thing together. Obviously, Jaws is such a, you know, high caliber, very talked about movie, not just for movie wise, but music, the score, John Williams. There's a lot of dynasty behind the movie. So I couldn't wait to get my hands on it.
Right on. Yeah, this is a movie I've seen a handful of times. I came to it later in life, probably in my early 20s, but yeah, it's a movie that it's the very first blockbuster is what it is.
Yep, I completely agree. It had this blockbuster feel. It felt like Spielberg. If I'm not mistaken, it's his first movie.
No, it was not his first movie. It was his third movie, his second one for the theaters, and it literally was the first blockbuster. Before this movie came out, you never saw lineups around the corner for to get into a movie.
All right, well, so yeah, I'm off on my trivia, but if people don't know, Mr. Matt here is the trivia guy for a lot of the movies. So this can be one part of our show. We're going to be discussing a lot about the trivia side of the movie. And on the second end, I'll be talking a bit more of the deeper emotional stuff of the movie. But I wanted to start off the show by saying I'm surprised. I really enjoyed it for a '70s movie. It kind of felt '70s, especially like the haircuts and stuff, but it felt relevant. It felt like it could have been still a blockbuster from today's standards. Obviously, there's a couple of things we'll talk about that doesn't hold as well.
Yeah,
but I actually got scared a couple of times. Surprisingly, I'm not a easy person to scare, but there's a couple.
Oh, sorry.
Parts I actually jumped out, and very tense moments too.
Yeah, for sure. There is one scene in particular, the scene where Hooper swims to the bottom and is inspecting the boat.
Yeah,
I've seen the movie God knows how many times. It still unsettles me to this day.
Yeah, that's exactly the part I was talking about. I was in the metro system going back home and watching my laptop, and I almost screamed.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, now actually
just to pivot back. Hold on, just to pivot on one thing you said. You were 100% right. It is very relevant today. Like watching this movie in the climate that we have with the COVID-19, seeing the mayor. He knows something is wrong, but he keeps telling Brody, "No, we're going to keep the beaches open because that's how we make our money." It's very eerily reminiscent of what's going on in some parts of the world today.
All right, we'll save that because that's actually the second part I want to talk about.
Okay, fair enough.
So save those thoughts, sir. We're gonna be using them later.
Okay.
Now, I actually wanted to go trivia side. I
Okay.
didn't look at all the trivia because I knew that was your job for today's episode. What interesting facts did you find about this movie?
Okay. Well, first off, the movie is based off of a book by Peter Benchley, also called Jaws. There are some major differences between the book and the movie. The number one being in the book, Matt Hooper, the character played by Richard Dreyfuss, actually has an affair with Chief Brody's wife.
Huh.
That is a plot that was cut out because they felt it wasn't relevant, and also Matt Hooper dies in the book in the scene in the cage at the very end. And
Huh.
originally he
Interesting.
was supposed to die in the movie as well, but there was something necessitated that change. The scene where Matt Hooper is in the cage when the shark attacks it, that was actually filmed with real life sharks. They put a little person in a smaller cage to get those shots. And the shot where the shark attacks the cage and like dismantles it was so good that they couldn't resist using it in the film. The only problem was they didn't have a dummy of the Matt Hooper character in the cage. So because of that, they had to write it into the movie that Matt Hooper actually survived the attack. Originally, he was supposed to die.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, no, they got deep water oceanographers who were known for filming sharks to film that sequence. The scene with the head that we mentioned earlier was actually filmed in a swimming pool after the fact. That was added in later in production.
Huh.
Yeah, and most notoriously, the shark didn't work. That is why
Yep.
you didn't see the shark until the very end of the movie. It's because a lot of the shots they tried to do just weren't working. So because of that, they decided, well, we're gonna have to work with what we have, and so they figured they would use things like a floating dock to show that the shark was there, or famously the barrels at the end in the final act. The barrels that they shoot into the shark were used so you can see where the shark was. That was all decided on the spot because they had a shark that didn't work.
Well, and you see, their misfortunes turn into gold because
Easily.
that's what made the movie work is the fact that you didn't know where you didn't see the shark that often. When the shark made a presence, it really made a presence. But I love the buoy scenes, like the floating scenes. That really added some sort of not horror element, but more of an unknown. And it really worked towards Steven Spielberg's advantage because all the good, scary movies is what you don't see that scares you.
Exactly. That's what Spielberg realized. Now I'm just going to read you my favorite bit of trivia I read. This is straight from IMDb. It goes, an accident during filming caused the Orca to begin sinking. The Orca is Quint's boat. Director Steven Spielberg began screaming over a bullhorn for the nearby safety boats to rescue the actors. Carter, who was one of the sound department, already up to his knees in water on the sinking Orca, held his tape recorder up over his head and screamed, "Screw the actors, save the sound department." During the accident, the film camera was submerged, so its film, still submerged in seawater, was assumed to be ruined. However, once it was realized that the developing solution is saline, the film was flown to a New York film lab, and technicians didn't lose any of it.
Wow.
Yeah. That's just a sign of all the problems that they had while filming this movie.
And wait, did you actually say "screw the actors, let's save the audio"?
The original line, I censored it a little bit. It's a 4-letter word that rhymes with puck. Yeah, the sound guy actually said that.
Well, that's well.
Yeah. And one more story. So
yeah.
Because of all the issues and all that stuff, filming went so much over schedule that a lot of the actors and the crew were getting very annoyed. And Steven Spielberg had caught word that after the movie was finished filming, the crew was gonna throw him in water as part of a mutiny. So the final shot of the movie, which was them blowing up the shark at the end, while the second unit was filming that, Steven Spielberg was already on a plane to Los Angeles.
So, oh wow! So they were that pissed at him.
Yeah,
huh?
He figured they were going to get their revenge on him. So while they were doing the last shot, he wasn't even wasn't even on location.
Wow, and it's kind of funny the parallels between Steven Spielberg And well, in Star Wars, George Lucas, so basically it's very notoriously bad filmings, extended
Yep,
filming times. The actors hated it, and it ended up being mega blockbusters that we talked about still to this day.
oh,
That
for sure.
testament, we're making a podcast episode out of it. So just goes to show you, those who are trying to be filmmakers right now, if it's not going your way, does not mean it's not going to be a success. It's
Yep.
a road that you have to go through.
Yeah, exactly. And at this time, Spielberg and Lucas were already friends, and Lucas actually went and visited the special effects department with Spielberg during the filming, and so he saw the shark. And so, as a joke, he decided to put his head in for a picture inside the Jaws teeth. So Spielberg, as a joke of his own, decided to get the mechanism to close onto Lucas's head. But unfortunately, in what should have been foreshadowing, the mechanism malfunctioned, and George Lucas was stuck in the shark's jaws for about 3 hours.
I did not know that
Yeah,
either. Well,
yeah. I made point to
yeah.
watch the documentary after I watched the Blu-ray today.
Cool. Okay, so any other interesting facts?
Yeah. So this, at one point, if I'm not mistaken, was the highest-grossing film of all time. It grossed $100 million in its first 59 days. And in just 78 days, it overtook The Godfather as the highest-grossing film at the North American box office. When that Godfather at that time held the record with $86 million. That just shows how far we've come in movies.
Oh,
yeah. And like I said earlier, it was considered the first blockbuster because never before had lines for a movie literally broke the block.
Well, yeah, again, that's a testament of Steven Spielberg's genius.
Yep.
Now, talking about that, I actually want to go into the movie itself.
Yep.
There's a couple of things I realized. It kind of shows it's the early years of Spielberg because there is a lot of hit and misses in certain parts of the movie. His hits were the main characters are so well done.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he did not go with the perfect, hero type characters. They're all flawed in a way. They all have their humanity, and it's very well constructed. Another really good point I find from the movie is the way he uses the camera. Those shots that you zoom back once the character realizes a moment and the camera pans back is such a beautifully used technique that really spoke to me while I was watching the movie.
Oh, for sure. The Jaws zoom in particular is one that really hits home the danger that the movie is trying to to present. Which that's the shot where Chief Brody sees the very first shark, the second shark attack, the one on the little boy. Yeah. That's for me. That's probably the best example of what you were describing. Is that scene alone?
Yeah, well, that scene, that's exactly the thing I was talking about. And it kind of it almost emulates a sinking feel, that throat, that thing in your throat feeling when you realize something's really off here. And it's brilliant. Now for the downsides, some of the supporting characters, some the background characters are so bad.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Okay, well, you'll probably tell me after, but they are so bad, especially the crowd scenes. There's a couple of times I picked up when everyone's running, I can point out a couple people laughing. I'm like, okay, no, this is not good. So there was a couple of mishaps, especially for the background players, and just certain scenes I find kind of they were there to be there, but it was kind of pointless and didn't really move the movie forward. I don't know, it didn't work as a whole for me, and it kind of took me off a couple of times. But then there was some gold moments. Especially one of the surprising moments I was not expecting to like, and it might be my favorite movie moment of the movie, is when they're having downtime in the cabin in the boat and comparing scars and stories.
You're not alone on that scene. That is a lot of people's favorite scenes. That is actually homage in Kevin Smith's movie Mallrats. And a little bit of information. I don't know if you're aware of this, but maybe some of the listeners are. The story that Quinn tells about the USS Indianapolis is actually a true event. Yeah, that is actual true event that happened. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, but and it's just, I don't, was it in the book or they added
That was
in the
added into
movie
the
like
script.
that?
That was added because, once again, because the shark wasn't working. So they're sitting out in sea trying to get this thing to work. And Spielberg and them decided, well, we got to film something. So that scene actually came up on the spot. So that was not in the original script.
Well, again, that's the powerful thing of good
Yeah.
filmmakers listening to their actors, listening to people around them, and improvising on the spot and just finding gold moments, because that moment really made the movie even more human to me. Because yes, it's about a shark, etc., but like I said beforehand, the characters are what makes the movie, and all three of them are so
Yeah.
different type of people that don't get along necessarily, but doesn't mean you can't have a bonding moment. And that bonding moment was really, really, personally, like now watching the movie, maybe in the top five, like just dialogue moments I've seen in a long
Oh yeah,
time.
for sure. That movie is the epitome of the bonding moment on screen. And like you were saying just a few moments ago, like you can tell most throughout most of the movie, like the tension between the characters. Well, that's actually real. Richard Dreyfuss, who plays Hooper, and Robert Shaw, who plays Quint, they didn't actually get along on set. Quint was
Huh.
like was doing what Robert Shaw was doing to Dreyfuss, what his character was doing to Hooper, and like bad mouthing him and saying he wasn't a man and all that stuff. Even though in private they were, he was gentlemanly towards them, but on set he was a real jerk. And so that actually played really well onto the screen for believability because that tension was actually there.
Well, that's good
Yeah,
acting. Like you go in your character to get out the best you can of the other actors. You just play on that, and you play on their emotion, and it really showed. I did not know that was the case, but it does show on the movie that Hooper gets
yeah,
annoyed. Something that grabs Hooper. So congrats to them. Um, Also, another thing I want to talk about, and kind of touched on what you said beforehand on today's day and age, the real villain in this movie is humanity, is the way we react to things,
exactly.
the way that the shark is a natural predator. He's just doing his thing, right? But it's the way that we as humans deal with these kind of situations, and the reasoning we have just makes no sense. And that's the real horror in this
Yeah,
movie.
you're 100% right. Like that theme has always been there, but like I said earlier, watching what's going on in the world right now with the way people are handling the COVID-19 and how some world leaders are like denying it and stuff. And I'm not just saying I'm not just hinting at the United States. There are other world leaders that are doing that. The mayor of Amityville is a perfect example of what is wrong with society, trying to earn like profit over safety. You know what I mean? It's shocking
Mm.
how relevant that was, that it still is. Like it really hit me this time.
Yeah, and that goes to a point I was talking about when I was uh, thinking about what I could talk about this movie, going more into the deeper philosophy of what this message is about. There's something that stood out to me. It kind of feels like Steven Spielberg was talking about three aspects of the seven deadly sins:
Okay.
hunger, greed, and pride. Hunger being the shark. He's always eating. That's his main
Yep.
purpose, right? And his hunger led to his death. And you have greed, which is the
Mm-hmm.
mayor, that the only thing thinking about is deadlines. His greed led to people's death. And third is the captain's pride. He smashed the radio. He was not listening to other people. He had his way and
Yeah.
his way only. And that led to his death. So it's maybe it's just me, but that was an interesting fact that every deadly sin that you portrayed, those characters or those like the shark and both of them were dead because of
Yeah,
it.
it's that's actually something I never really thought of. And to go back to like a difference between the book and the film, the mayor in the book, he's actually pressured by the mob into keeping the beach open because the mob has real estate investments and what have you. I like that they took that element out for the movie because it just made him seem
Yeah.
like a greedy bureaucrat, which I think worked way better than having him being threatened by the mob.
Yeah, I completely the only thing that actually made sense And the only time I'm like, I actually agreed with the mayor is when they wanted to dissect the shark on the spot.
Yeah,
And he's like, no, I'm not going to have a kid spill out, spill out and everyone's going to see remains of
yeah,
dead
and that
bodies,
was a real shark too.
That was,
That was a
that
real shark that
was.
they used, and it by the time it got there from Florida, it was already starting to the contents of its stomach was already starting to come out. So the reaction on everybody's faces was legit.
Yeah. But yeah, so very relevant points, and also something else I found interesting because in today's day and age, we kind of like don't
Mm,
think about it, but it was also a story of the new ways versus the old
okay.
ways, new school versus old school way of thinking, because the captain was stuck in his ways that we're doing it this way. I don't need your technology. I don't need your hyper like your sensors and your this and that. And Hooper's like, yeah, but these things work. So it was really a new school versus old school mentality approach to the way they were doing things. And yeah, I found it interesting. I didn't realize this movie was going to touch
Oh
upon
yeah,
that.
no, this was a very well written script. It touches on a lot of different facets of humanity, and it was a really well written script for sure.
And also one other thing I have to point out, I might have known in the past, but just forgot. I forgot John Williams actually did the score. I knew
Yeah,
the music, but I did not know it came from
he had
him, or
he
forgot
had
it
been
came
he's
from
been
him.
by that point he had been around for a long time. Like he had done like scores for TV shows and stuff like that. And by this point, I think he was conducting the Academy Award Orchestra. But this was the very first big score that he did, the first memorable one. And that's another funny thing. When Steven Spielberg went to visit John Williams while he was composing the score, he played him what we now know as the Jaws theme on the piano. And Spielberg just laughed it off, and he
Mm.
was just like, "No, seriously, what have you got planned?" And if you watch that if you watch this movie without the music on, it's not as scary. This is the first instance that I know of where the music heightens the tension. Really, like it just makes it that much scarier.
Yeah, it really complements, and like you said, it really heightens the tension because the music that's composed is not. Yeah, you can probably listen now because it's iconic, but on its own, it's not the most harmonious thing. It's
Yeah.
aggressive. It's it even goes like certain at times happy,
Yes.
but at the same time in the background, there's like this eerie feeling to this very nautical sounding
Yeah. What
songs. So he did an
one of the
amazing job.
best examples of that is in the third act when they are trying to get the shark where they shoot the barrels at him. They get the barrels on him, and you hear the happy music, like, yeah, we got it. And then the barrels go underneath and the music dies. And then you're back to the gloom, and it's like
um,
that is perfect.
and what is, in your opinion, the lowest moment of the movie? The part of the movie that just got you out of it, or you prefer the least?
Um the part I preferred the least. I don't really think I have one that is like, I mean,
Okay.
there are scenes like, I guess I'm with you. The scenes where you see the village, like the people of the town more often. And to go back to earlier, the reason why they didn't seem like they were doing a good job is because they're
Mm,
actually all locals. Outside of the main, yeah, outside of all the
okay.
main cast, outside of the Brodies, and then Quint and Hooper and the mayor, and I think the deputy, everyone else was locals. Yeah, so I think that
So
played into what you were talking about earlier. So yeah, there are some scenes with those guys where you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, what it is.
in my end, it was actually the captain's death scene. I don't know why I just started
Really?
laughing. There's something about, yeah, it just, I was expecting, like, the whole movie got me. I was intense in it. And I was like, well, what's going to happen? And actually, like I said before, I actually
Yeah.
jump scared at least once. But at that moment, I was like, okay. And I don't know, this something about the pacing of it. It just was so
Well,
drastic.
it was
Uh,
edited down quite a bit. It actually was originally a lot more gorier. There is in the deleted scenes where the shark is actually swimming with Quint in his mouth, so it was edited down quite a bit.
okay, well, it kind
Yeah.
of shows because something about the pacing and the execution of it just didn't land for me and actually made
Yeah,
it comical.
but how much of that was the shark? Because when in that moment, that's when you can really tell just that the shark's not real. Did that play into it as well?
No, actually, it didn't. I actually found the shark cool. It's like I said, it's the
Okay,
pacing, it's the way it happened, it's the angles, like the shot angles of the captain's face, the way they recorded it. I don't know. I found it over the top. The shark was actually the least of
okay,
the reason why I got out of it. It's more the actor and the way it was executed.
okay. Hmm.
And what's the highest moment for you
The
of
highest
the
moment
movie?
for me is what we touched on earlier the scene in the cabin where they bond.
Okay.
The it's what's known as the Indianapolis scene. Where
Yeah.
you actually
Okay.
get his where
Uh,
you finally understand Quint's motivations as to why he hunts sharks.
Okay. Yeah, same here for me. There's actually a tie. It's that moment and quintessentially the opening scene.
That's
That was
iconic.
chilling. The screams of the girl, the way she was flapping left and right. Maybe not the most accurate
Nope.
way of probably how it would look like, but it was still gripping for some like almost 30 odd something year movie to have that give you that feeling of irkiness right off the
Dude, try
bat
45 year
is a
old movie.
testament
That
of
movie's almost 50.
oh wow I'm bad at math oh but yeah well, so that's even more of a testament of what I'm
Yeah.
saying, an almost 50-year-old movie that is able to get you in your in your insides and make you go like ooh that's
Yeah. That
cringy,
movie came out in 1974.
that is
Yeah.
that's a testament of how classic
Oh
it
yeah, no,
is.
for sure. That is very up. That is very Hitchcockian how they did it, and it helps build that intensity. It's like you know some bad's gonna be happening throughout this movie. That was a great way to do it.
And now that you rewatched it, now that you re-seen it, reanalyzed it on a score 1 to 10, what would you give this movie from today's
9,
watch?
hands down. It
No-
it is not Spielberg's best work, but it is a definite representation of what we have to come with E.T., with Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park, and this was his coming out party, and you can definitely tell that there were some good things to come from him.
Okay, and I would give it an 8.5. There's like these couple moments that took me out, but for the fact that I was watching a almost 50-year-old movie and really into it and forget it's a very old movie and just got sucked into it, and like I said, almost had a couple of screams in the metro system, is a testament of how good this is. So a solid
Yeah, right
8.5 on
on, right
my
on.
end. All right. So that pretty much concludes our recording of the Frenchie Watches Jaws. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Matt. Where can we find you on
You
the
can find
internet?
me all over social media, Twitter and Instagram at soda_the_saxman. You can find me mostly on Instagram and roaming around the Schmoes of the North Facebook page.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter on the Northern Schmoes Twitter. If not, you can find me on Schmoes of the North Facebook page under Louis Monette. If you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe. And if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, do yourself a favor, hit that button. And that being said, thank you very much for listening, and you have a wonderful night.
So long.
Ciao, Matt.